Hey guys, what's going on? John here, back again for another Magic the Gathering video, and in today's video we will be doing a budget commander deck tech for Anax and Cymede. It is worth $40, so it's very on budget and still quite a strong deck. So let's begin and get into the deck tech. So first up, we've got the commander. It's Anax and Cymede. It is a legendary creature, human soldier, 3/2 for 1 red white with first strike and vigilance, and it has heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Anax and Cymede, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. So it promotes a strategy using Aura and Spellslinger Voltron, basically just spells and auras that target Anax and Cymede so we can buff up a huge board. And it also likes having a lot of small creatures like tokens, because when you do cast those auras and spells that target Anax and Cymede, you want those little tokens and small creatures to get much bigger so that they're legitimate threats and you just overwhelm your opponent. So next we've got the categories. We've got 9 categories for this deck. We've got heroic creatures, token producers, spell slinging heroic, aura heroic, protecting Anax and Cymede, aura and spell slinger payoffs, miscellaneous value and removal, ramp, and finally lands. Let's get into our first category, which is heroic. The first creature we've got is a Crowan Crusader, which is a 1-mana 1/1, which reads, Heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, create a 1/1 red soldier creature token with haste. So it provides 2 things we like. Not only does it have a heroic creature that we can target if Anax and Cymede has been shut off, but it also gives us tokens to pump up with Anax and Cymede. Next up, we've got Favored Hoplite. It's a 1-mana 1/2 with heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Favored Hoplite, put a +1/+1 counter on Favored Hoplite and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. Also very helpful because when you've got your big swings going, Favored Hoplite is a really good creature for this because you prevent all the damage. So even if your opponents have bigger blockers, Favored Hoplite is not one of the creatures they're going to be wanting to block because they don't get to kill it. So Favored Hoplite is a really hard matchup for opponents that they might have to burn a removal spell on. Next, we've got Hero of Eros. It's a 2-mana 2/2 that reads, Aura spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and Heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Hero of Eros, put a +1/+1 counter on Hero of Eros. So it provides 2 things. We want to discount our Aura spells so we can cast them for much cheaper, and it gives us another heroic creature in case Anax and Cymede gets shut down. Next up, we've got Phalanx Leader. It's a 2-mana 1/1 that has Heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Phalanx Leader, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this, much like Anax and Cymede, does pretty much the exact same thing, minus trample. It gives all of our small creatures +1/+1 counters, so it helps provide our board with a ton of beaters because it transforms our small tokens and little creatures into real legitimate threats. Next up, we've got 10th District Legionnaire. It's a 2-mana 2/2 with haste. Whenever you cast a spell that targets 10th District Legionnaire, put a +1/+1 counter on 10th District Legionnaire, and then scry 1. So it's kind of got pseudo-heroic. It doesn't have the keyword, but if it was printed in the Theros block, it would have had the keyword of heroic because it has the same effect. Next up, we've got Tethmos High Priest. It's 3-mana 2/3 with heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Tethmos High Priest, return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we get all our small creatures back that we've been playing that also have heroic, and it's just a great target for heroic to beef up with spells. Great value creature all around. Next up, we've got Valduk, Keeper of the Flame. It's a 3-mana 3/2 that reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, for each aura and equipment attached to Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, create a 3/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. So Valduk is very helpful because once we stick all of our auras on him, he creates tons of 3/1s that we can use instant speed tricks to then buff up with Anax and Cymede. So all those 3/1s are huge, and so we get a ton of big creatures swinging in just because we've got auras attached to Valduk. Next up, we've got Broodkeeper. It's a 4 mana 2/3. Whenever an aura becomes attached to Broodkeeper, put a 2/2 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. It has fire breathing. Um, Broodkeeper is very helpful because we can use our auras to gain even more value if we don't have Anax and Cymede. We attach auras, and it guarantees we don't get 2-for-1'd because even though our auras are on the Broodkeeper, if it gets removed, we've still got that dragon that Broodkeeper has created, and since it has fire breathing, there is a legitimate threat with that dragon. Next up, we've got Zada Hedron Grinder. It's a 4 mana 3/3. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Zada Hedron Grinder, copy that spell for each other creature you control that the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. So, basically, our instants and sorceries are Spellslinger Heroic. We target Zada with them, so Anax and Cymede also gets targeted with them, which means we trigger Heroic, and we trigger all our other little Heroic creatures. Also, since a lot of our Spellslinger Heroic spells buff up a creature. This is especially helpful because it targets Anax and Cymede, but also targets our little tokens. So we can cast a spell that gives our tokens, say, +2/+2 or +3/0. And so it's very, very helpful, and it's definitely a prime removal target for your opponents. It's one of the best creatures in the deck. Next up, we've got Category 2, our token producers. First up, we've got Loyal Apprentice. It's a 2 mana 2/1 with haste, and Lieutenant. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. That token gains haste until end of turn. So it produces a lot of tokens with flying. They've got evasive abilities, great for pumping with Anax and Cymede. Next up, we've got Young Pyromancer. It's a 2 mana 2/1. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 red elemental token. Really helpful because we're already casting tons of instants and sorceries targeting Cymede, so we create, Anax and Cymede. So we create a bunch of elementals that all get buffed from those instant and sorcery spells. All around, a very helpful card. Next up, we've got Legion Warboss, which is the most expensive card in the deck. It's 3 mana 2/2 with Mentor, which reads, whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with lesser power. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That token gains haste until end of turn and attacks this combat if able. So it creates a ton of tokens that swing in, but also has Mentor to buff up some smaller creatures. All around a very helpful creature. And finally, we have White Sun Zenith. It's an instant that costs X white, 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 and put X 2/2 white cat creature tokens onto the battlefield. Shuffle White Sun Zenith into its owner's library. Basically, we just get to create a ton of cats if we've got a lot of mana, or just a few if we've got a little bit of mana. But generally, we're creating a ton of cats, and it goes back into our library. Obviously, that was designed that way to stop recursion, but it's good for us because we don't have much recursion being in Boros colors, so we get to recast it at some point later in the game. Next up, we've got Slinging Spells, Category 3. The first spell is Defiant Strike, 1 mana instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Draw a card. So, triggering Anax and Cymede, giving it a little buff, and drawing a card from it. Great spell. Expedite, 1 mana instant. Target creature gains haste until end of turn. Draw a card. Again, same thing as Defiant Strike, giving our commander haste, so enabling it the first turn it comes out. If it's being recast and we've got enough mana for Expedite, triggers the ability, and draws us a card. All around, very helpful. Next up, we've got Seething Anger. It's a 1 mana sorcery with buyback for 3. Target creature gets +0 until end of turn, buffs up Anax and Cymede, and triggers Heroic. We've got Adamant Will. It's a 2 mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains indestructible until end of turn. This could have been put in the Protecting Anax and Cymede, but I like this more in the Spellslinging category because it buffs up Anax and Cymede too, so it gets our commander huge, and we can swing in with Anax and Cymede with no repercussions. Next up, we've got Fists of Flame. It's a 2 mana instant that reads, draw a card until end of turn. Target creature gains trample and gets +1/+0 for each card you've drawn this turn. So, if we're targeting Anax and Cymede, it's automatically getting at least +2/+0. So it's actually a very helpful card in our deck that buffs up Anax and Cymede and triggers Heroic. Next up, we've got Martial Glory. It's a 2-mana instant that reads target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Target creature gets +0/+3 until end of turn. Obviously very helpful because it can be used on defense and on offense, giving our creatures power buffs, and we can split it between 2 creatures, so if we want one creature to be able to survive and then we want to buff up our commander, we still trigger Heroic, but we can also trigger Heroic on a second creature or have another creature survive. So it's very, very helpful. Next up, we've got Psychotic Fury. It's 2-mana, instant, target multicolored creature gains double strike until end of turn, draw a card. Just gives our commander double strike, triggers Heroic. Everything's good about it. Temur Battle Rage. It's a 2-mana instant. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. It also has Ferocious. That creature also gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. It's very helpful. It gives our commander double strike, triggering Heroic, but also if we don't have our commander out, it can give a creature double strike, trigger that creature's Heroic, and trigger Ferocious, which we won't need if we've got our commander out, but it's still really helpful sometimes. Category 4 is Aura Heroic. We've got a bunch of auras that really help trigger Heroic and buff up our commander. First, we've got Cartouche of Solidarity. It's a 1-mana enchantment. Enchant creature you control. When Cartouche of Solidarity enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white warrior, token with Vig. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has first strike. Gets us a token and triggers Heroic. Very, very helpful. Next up, we've got Crown of Flames. 1-mana enchantment. It gives a creature fire breathing, and you can pay 1 red to return Crown of Flames to its owner's hand. Gives our creature fire breathing, triggers Heroic, and also you can return it to our hand to cast it again the next turn and trigger Heroic another time, so it's very helpful. Next up, we've got Dragon Mantle. It's a 1-mana enchantment. When Dragon Mantle enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature has fire breathing. Again, gives fire breathing a good way to pump all our mana into something, and draws us a card, triggers Heroic. Great, just a great card. Next up, we've got Ethereal Armor. It's a 1-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. Triggers Heroic and can make our commander really huge if we've got a lot of enchantments. Next up, we've got Griff's Boon. It's a 1-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has flying, and you can pay 4 to return Griff's Boon from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to target creature, and you can only activate that at sorcery speed. So it triggers Heroic, gives Anax and Cymede evasion to chip in for some huge commander damage, but also if Anax and Cymede gets killed, we can replay it and then replay Griff's Boon from the graveyard to trigger Heroic again. Overall, very, very helpful. Next up, we've got Hyena Umbra. It's a 1-mana enchantment that reads, Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has first strike and Totem Armor. It triggers Heroic, buffs our commander a little bit, makes it harder to block, but also, if our commander gets hit with a kill spell, instead we just destroy Hyena Umbra, and all damage that would be dealt to it, and anything that would destroy it is basically stopped, and instead gets redirected to the Umbra. Very, very helpful. Next up, we've got Mark of Fury. It's a 1-mana enchantment that reads, Enchanted creature has haste. At the beginning of your end step, return Mark of Fury to its owner's hand. So it gives our commander haste, triggers Heroic, but also gets back to our hand so we can reliably recast it for 1 mana each turn, triggering Heroic again. Very, very good. Next up, we've got All That Glitters. It's a 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. It's a slightly more expensive, but also triggers with our artifacts. It's basically the same thing as Ethereal Armor, but still very helpful in this deck. Triggers Heroic and makes our commander huge. Angelic Gift. 2-mana enchantment. When Angelic Gift enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature has flying, gives our commander evasion, draws a card, and triggers Heroic. Overall, very solid. Next up, we've got Gitu Fire Breathing. It's a 2-mana enchantment with flash. An enchanted creature has fire breathing, and you can pay 1 to return Gitu Fire Breathing to its owner's hand. So overall, really good value. Only 2 mana to flash it out, and you can return it to your hand. You can play this at instant speed to really surprise your opponents, and then continue to trigger Heroic over and over by returning it to its hand, and it can make the commander really huge. Next up, we've got Conviction. It's a 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +1/+3, and you can pay 1 white, return Conviction to its owner's hand. Same thing, because it's able to be returned to its owner's hand, we can recast it, trigger Heroic again. Overall, just great, and buffs our commander's defense. Great on defense. Next up, we've got Dual Casting. It's 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature has pay 1 red, tap it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So we likely won't be targeting our commander with this because we'll like to swing in with our commander. We'll target something else, and so we can copy instants and sorcery spells so we can have 2 things target our commander. Really helpful. Also, this can trigger Heroic itself if really needed. Next up, we've got Madcap Skills. It's a 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +3/+0, and can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, which basically gives it menace. Triggers Heroic, makes our commander harder to block. Pretty self-explanatory. Next up is Squeeze Embrace. It's a 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. When enchanted creature is put into a graveyard, return that creature card to its owner's hand. So buffs up our commander, and a little bit of removal protection for our commander. It allows us to recast it for just 3 mana. Next up, we've got Scourge of the Nobilis. It's a 3-mana enchantment. As long as enchanted creature is red, it gets +1/+1 and has fire breathing. And as long as enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. So we're likely going to be casting this on our commander, triggering Heroic and giving it fire breathing, +2/+2, and lifelink. Really a solid card overall. Next up, we've got Category 5, Protecting Anax and Cymede. Since we're going to be covering it in auras and spells, we really don't want to get 2-for-1 or 3-for-1, etc. So we like to protect our commander. And the first way we've got to do that is Ajani's Presence. It's a 1-mana instant with Strive. Ajani's Presence costs 3 more to cast for each target beyond the first. Any number of target creatures each gain +1/+1 and gain indestructible until end of turn, so that will trigger Heroic, but also give our creature indestructible, protecting it against board wipes and removal. Next up, we've got Brave the Elements. It's 1-mana instant. Choose a color. White creatures you control gain protection from the chosen color until end of turn. Again, it's removal and board wipe protection. If it's a damage-based board wipe, again, really, really helpful. Emerge Unscathed is a 1-mana instant. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, and it has Rebound. So really helpful. Happens twice and targets, so we get Heroic and can protect our commander. Next up, we've got God's Willing. 1-mana instant. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Scry 1. Allows us to fix our top decks, protects our commander, and triggers Heroic. Overall, a really great card. Apostle's Blessing is an instant that costs 1 and 1 white Phyrexian mana. It reads, target artifact or creature you control gains protection from artifacts or from the color of your choice until end of turn, protects our commander, and triggers Heroic. Boros Charm. It's a 2-mana instant that reads, choose 1. Boros Charm deals 4 damage to target player. Permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn, and target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So it can be used as a finisher, it can be used to protect our commander, and can be used to give our commander double strike, therefore triggering Heroic. Overall, a really great and versatile card, and definitely worth the slightly more expensive price tag than the average card in this deck. Next up, we've got Shelter. It's a 2-mana instant. Target creature you control gains protection for the color of your choice until end of turn. Draw a card. So, protection for our commander, triggers Heroic, and draws us a card. Really great. Valorous Stance. It's a 2-mana instant. Choose 1. Target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. So it can protect our commander and trigger Heroic, or it can be used as removal in a pinch. Next up, we've got Flickering Ward. It's a 1-mana enchantment. When you play Flickering Ward, choose a color. Enchanted creature gains protection from the chosen color, and you can pay 1 white to return Flickering Ward to its owner's hand. So we gain protection from a color, triggering Heroic if we cast it on Anax and Cymede, and also we can return it to our hand to re-trigger Heroic and gain protection from a different color if need be. Finally, We've got Shield of Duty and Reason. It's a 1-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature has protection from green and from blue. Triggers Heroic, grants us protection from 2 widely played colors in Commander. Next up, we've got Crown of Awe. It's a 2-mana enchantment. Enchanted creature has protection from black and red. Sacrifice Crown of Awe. Enchanted creature and other creatures that share a creature type with it gain protection from black and red until end of turn. So, triggers Heroic and also works as protection for other creatures, not just our commander, if we sacrifice Crown of Awe. Next up, we've got Unquestioned Authority. It's a 3-mana enchantment. Enchant creature. When in Unquestioned Authority enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted creature has protection from creatures. Basically, we get around all blockers, trigger Heroic, and draw a card. This is a huge finisher in our deck and really turns off a lot of what our opponents can do to stop this deck. Next up, we've got Category 6, Aura and Spell Synergies. First, we've got Shran, Senior Edificer. 2-mana 2/2 that reads, whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. Obviously, aura is the only one that matters in our deck, but again, we'll be drawing cards off of all the auras we play, and this deck runs, I think, 21 of them, so that's a lot of card draw. Next up, we've got Starfield Mystic. It's 2-mana 2/2. Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less cast. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Starfield Mystic. So again, it gets us a little bit of value if we get 2 for 1 or 3 for 1, etc. And also discounts our enchantments. Again, makes those 21 enchantments we've got cost a lot less, and makes our deck so much better. Danitha Caption Paragon. It's a 3-mana 2/2 with First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink, and aura and equipment spells you cast cost 1 less cast. Same thing as Starfield Mystic, discounts our 21 auras. Really, really helpful in this deck to get our engine rolling. Next up, we've got Feather the Redeemed. It's a 3-mana 3/4 with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So basically, all of our spells that we are casting targeting our commander that would normally go to the graveyard, instead they're all going to our hand on the next end step, allowing us to repeatedly recast them. This card is absolutely huge in our deck and is really probably the best card in the deck outside of the commander. Next up, we've got Heliod's Pilgrim. It's a 3-mana 1/2. When Heliod's Pilgrim enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an aura card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. Tutors for an aura, obviously extremely helpful. It gets us an aura that we might really need in any situation to help either save our commander or allow us to close out the game and get the win. Next up, we've got Mesa Enchantress. It's a 3-mana 0/2. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. We cast our 21 auras, we draw a card off each of them. Really, really helpful creature in this deck. Finally, we've got Tiana, Ship's Caretaker. It's a 5-mana 3/3 with flying and first strike. Whenever an aura or equipment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So if our commander gets killed with a bunch of auras on it, not only does it go to the command zone and allow us to recast our commander at some point, we also get all of our auras that we're targeting back, and we can recast them, trigger Heroic again, and make our commander huge again. This card is really, really strong in this deck. Next up, we've got Category 7, Removal and Miscellaneous Value. First up, we've got Anafinza, Kindry Spirit. It's a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, bolster 1. It makes all of our little creatures a lot bigger and creates a lot of threats that normally would be a lot smaller. Gives us our creatures more +1/+1 counters. Next up, we've got Duergar Hedgemage. It's a 3-mana 2/2. When Duergar Hedgemage comes into play, if you control 2 or more mountains, you may destroy target artifact. When Duergar Hedgemage comes into play, if you control 2 or more planes, you may destroy target enchantment. Obviously, since we're a budget deck, we'll play a lot of mountains and planes. Destroying artifacts and enchantments is key. Frontline Medic is 3-mana 3/3 with Battalion. Whenever Frontline Medic and at least 2 other creatures attack, creatures you control are indestructible this turn. Sacrifice Frontline Medic. Counter target spell with X in its mana cost unless its controller pays 3. The second ability is not really as relevant, but the first ability is huge, allows us to swing in with our army with no repercussions. None of our creatures will die when blocked because they're all indestructible. Absolutely huge in this deck. Next up, we've got Swords to Plowshares. It's a 1-mana instant. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Just really good one mana removal. Probably the best piece of white removal in Commander. And it's super cheap because it's been reprinted a bunch of times. Next up, we've got Crush Contraband. It's a 4-mana instant. Choose one or both. Exile target artifact. Exile target enchantment. Gets rid of problem artifacts and enchantments. Overall, a pretty good card. Next up, we've got Change to the Rocks. It's a 1-mana enchantment. Enchant mountain you control. When Change to the Rocks enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Chain to the Rocks leaves the battlefield. Since we're playing Boros colors, we'll have the white mana to cast it and a mountain to attach it to, and we exile a creature for just 1 mana. That's super helpful, and since land destruction is not really prevalent, it's likely that Chain to the Rocks will stick around for a while. Next up, we've got our 8th category, Ramp, of which we've only got 3 pieces because most of our deck is 4 mana or less. I think we only have like 1 or 2 spells that are more than that. First up, we've got Boros Signet. It's a 2-mana artifact. Pay 1, tap it, add 1 mana of each of our colors to our mana pool, so that's red, white. Next up, we've got Mind Stone. It's a 2-mana artifact. Tap, add colorless to your mana pool. Pay 1, tap, sacrifice Mind Stone, draw a card. And finally, we've got Boros Cluestone. It's a 3-mana artifact. Tap, add red or white to our mana pool, and pay red, white, and tap, sacrifice Boros Cluestone, draw a card. Finally, our last category, we've got lands. We've got Battlefield Forge as our pain land for the deck. Boros Garrison is our bounce land. Boros Guildgate is a tap land, and it's our Guildgate in our colors. Next up, we've got Evolving Wilds that allows us to find a basic of either color that we want. Next up, we've got Needle Spires, which enters the battlefield tapped, but also can become a 2/1 with double strike. So very helpful if we need that last bit of damage to beat down with. It's a great man land. Sajiri Step enters the battlefield tapped, but gives our commander protection from a chosen color until end of turn. Overall, a great value land. Finally, we've got Terramorphic Expanse, does the same thing as Evolving Wilds, and Windscarred Crag, which is a tap land that gains us 1 life. As far as basics go, we've got 15 plains and 11 mountains. Final breakdown of this deck. This deck can be extremely explosive. If you manage to chain a bunch of spells with a bunch of tokens on the board, you can just win instantaneously by moving to combat. I mean, your opponents will just not see it coming, and you'll come out of nowhere if your opponents are tapped out to just take over the game. The final price of this deck is $39.44, so we are under that $40 budget range. A super, super cheap deck. Thank you all for watching this video. It is a real pleasure to have you here watching my videos on this channel. I would really love it if you liked the video and subscribed. It lets me know that you really enjoy my content. I will continue to do Commander deck techs because people really seem to enjoy them, and as Commander as a format I really enjoy. I love showing off decks that I've built to other people, especially budget ones, because I know a lot of people are able to build them at a cheap price. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later.